Welcome aboard the UC Vigilance. I am Commander Kibwe Ikande. And you are a sheep with no shepherd. Feel free to consider this inquiry my application for the job. You may be a lonely sheep now, but have you always been? Do you have a family? Loved ones? I suppose I should have expected that would be your response given your past. No, I'm not threatening you. And yes, I know all about your past. The only thing more criminal than your past is how many pages we had to print to cover it all. I ask because I'd like you to understand something about me. When I was a boy, protecting family meant being sent across the settled systems to fight the colony war. Some men saw it as tragedy. Others saw opportunity. One of these opportunists was responsible for the torture of my father. This opportunist was an ideologue named Isaac Wyke. He led a terrorist group called the Star Synthesis Liberation Army. During the colony war, he took power in a small region of the settled systems. And like many ideologues before him, he attempted to build paradise. And like many ideologues before him, he failed. But he remained steadfast in his belief his ideology couldn't have failed. Its apparent failure must have been due to some foreign element or act of sabotage. When he uncovered secret UC operatives within his borders, my father among them, he found his saboteurs. Certainty is the death of argument. And certainty is the only currency ideologues deal in. Wyke was certain of my father's guilt, and it allowed him to torture my father into a false confession, even blinding him in the process. Thankfully, his scheduled execution was interrupted when the UC dealt with Wyke. My father's plight was a formative experience for me, teaching me the danger of ideology. A vivid lesson I'd be reminded of every time I looked at his face. The torture they put him through was so vile. Where his eyes once were, afterwards there was only sunken holes. Today, another dangerous ideologue threatens the settled systems. Delgado of the Crimson Fleet. Precisely. For years, we've been clawing at the Crimson Fleet from the outside. But with patience and prying, we've found a few cracks to slip through. From the inside, we may be able to finally tear the whole thing down. Listen, my father, despite having been tortured by him, never hated Wyke. He never hated anyone. I can't say I've managed to acquire his capacity for forgiveness, but I'm intent on trying. I don't know what adversity derailed your life. I can't undo the damage the world has done to you. What I can offer is a helping hand to get your life back on track. To set your life right, and that starts here. What do you say? Will you work with me to take down the Crimson Fleet? He's the leader of the Crimson Fleet. A faction of anarchists, radicals, and anti-government extremists. They regularly resort to trading in illicit goods and piracy to fund their operations. They engage in guerrilla warfare against both the UC and Freestar Collective, often killing innocents. But for a group of anarchists, they are remarkably organized and cautious in their operation. They see oppression everywhere. Whether businessman or bureaucrat, none are innocent in their eyes. But it's always easier to criticize which way the ship is headed when you're not the one steering. It's tempting for us to portray history's villains as sinister schemers and power-hungry tyrants. But I believe any study of history ought to begin with where history begins, in the minds of its practitioners, studying the patterns of thought that produce tragedy, so we may recognize it in ourselves. No man believes themselves evil, and no man believes himself foolish. Every step White took, he rationalized. The show trials were organic, not a thing of artifice. Once he began from the assumption of guilt, torture was simply a tool from which to extract that truth. Nor do I believe White lacked for compassion. If anything, compassion was the map, certainty the fuel. Yet it nurtured horrors, his compassion. It's a difficult thing to get a good man to do terrible things. Yet, ideology, that conniving temptress, managed it with ease. When one doesn't see, one listens. To their voices, to their words. My father ruminated on them, studied them. Although he was blinded, he saw people more clearly than any other man I've ever known. He was able to turn what any other man would have considered weakness into a strength. Uncertainty. You may think it weakness, as most do. But I see its true nature, its virtue. It's the proof of a mind not ruled by dogmatism. Knowing nothing but confidence is the mark of a fool. I implore you, please agree to work with me on this.